I forgot to mention some stuff in last week's episode about the death of Hollywood. That Hollywood seems to be over now. The Hollywood we once knew. But what I forgot to mention is that the larger kind of impacts that will have on culture, as to things like patriotism and just the cultural vibe, car design, all these weird things you don't think are related to movies, to the whole Hollywood culture, but they're so related. Remember watching a movie in a theater of like something like Independence Day or something like that. You want to after you leave the theater, you just want to go out and sign up for the army, right? That's not happening anymore. And it's going to have a huge impact on our cultures here in North America, at least anyway. But anyway, that's what I forgot to mention last week. But this week, it's about publishing and how you can be a magazine publisher if you want. I'll tell you how in this week's episode of the Cannabis Goldsmith. This is a show about jewelry, why we wear it, why it matters, how it's made, and what it means. I'm Alex D, and I turn cannabis into gold. I make mind-blowing jewelry in gold, silver, and platinum from cannabis plants here in Canada for stage, screen, for people who want to rock crazy jewelry. I'm the Cannabis Goldsmith. Now, what I mean about Hollywood is that this Hollywood, think of Hollywood like a tree with rings, right? Like you cut a slice of a tree, and you can see where it began in the middle, and it's sort of each year a ring is added, and another ring, and you get these rings on the tree. And Hollywood is like this. Hollywood, at its core, maybe was an art thing, but it had huge cultural impacts on stuff like recruitment for the U.S. Army. If a movie came out that really portrayed the Army in a good light, the sign-ups to the Army would increase after the movie was seen. So, get that. And car design, a car would be featured, some kind of futuristic car would be featured in a movie, and then it would impact the design of cars going forward by the car manufacturers. They would start adding little things or design elements from the movie into car design. And fashion works for fashion too. All that stuff, all that spin out stuff, all the rings on the tree of Hollywood, there's no core anymore. That's gone. So they're like, everything is in a flux. I mean, this is I guess you've noticed this too. Everything is in a flux. Nothing seems to be. It seems to be just like floating on top of a huge ocean, like a layer, where we seem to be a layer of stuff floating on top of an ocean, and there's no grounding anymore in anything. But you also need to ask whether the grounding itself was good or bad, right? Was tying your patriotism to a Hollywood movie a good thing or a bad thing? But anyway, this episode is about publishing. I'm going to tell you how to publish a magazine in this episode. I'll tell you how to do it. And you can be a publisher too if you want. I was a publisher once in the 90s, and I had no idea how to do it. But I ended up doing it, publishing a magazine for over 10 years. But the day before I published it, I printed it, and got it out on the street, I wasn't a publisher. I was just some dude who had no idea how to do it. So, like you, if you're ever wondering, I should publish a magazine about whatever subject area. Say maybe you like old vintage muscle cars or whatever. Or maybe you're in a community like I am, where there are all kinds of artists spread out far and wide in in the various little towns around here in southeastern Ontario, and an arts magazine comes along called a Fish Wrapper to gather all the artistic threads in the community together. I'm writing a monthly column now in a new local arts magazine. Now, I didn't think you could launch an arts magazine or any kind of magazine these days, because I thought the web and Google and Facebook had absolutely destroyed the printed press. The printed press, basically. They put everything online. And I really didn't think it would be possible to do. I mean, why publish a magazine, right? Why do it anyway? Because everything exists online. And the reason to do it is for variety, for choice. I mean, there needs to be choice, right? There needs to be choice. That's the core reason. It's like, okay, I want an alternative to the online media. So I'm going to print something on paper, right? Now, we've gotten away from that. We've look, I'm as guilty of it as anyone, because I was publishing a magazine in the 90s that I started and called Tribe, and it was printed on paper, on newsprint, and on the inside, and a glossy cover on the outside eventually. But I kind of felt guilty about doing it because of all the trees and stuff getting smushed into the paper. But it was all recyclable anyway. But I still went, when the web launched, we were the first there in Canada, and it was like, okay, this is great. Now we don't have to kill trees. We can get the word out, whatever. But okay, we've had digital publishing for a while now. So why go back? Why go back to publishing hard copies of a magazine? Well, as I said, it's an alternative to digital. And as digital gets more rife with problems, garbage content, what I talked about, the AI-generated slop that doesn't mean anything, that has no value, that's just filling up the internet. More and more people are looking for something more tailored and more serious and more tailored, I would say. They're looking for a source of tailored or curated information. And that's what a magazine is. So if you've ever thought of starting one, this is the show for you. I'll tell you how to do it. It's pretty easy, actually. The hard part of magazine publishing is the staying with it. That's the hard part. And you would think it's a huge deal. It's even hard to find magazines anymore. Like I went to like Walmart has a small magazine section, I think. But you don't even know where to get them. But you get the local community ones. They'll wind up in your diner where you go for breakfast. You might find one there, or at a restaurant you go to, or at a coffee shop. You'll find these local magazines that are usually free and that you can pick up, and you used to find them, and you can take them with you. And in those magazines is the curated content the publisher puts together, and sandwiched in between that is advertising that pays for the cost of the publication. So that's all it is, really. It's content and some advertising to help pay for the printing and the distribution of the content, and maybe a little profit if it's at all possible. Now, I thought nobody was going to do this anymore, but when I moved out here and I met Kathleen and Tim at Medium Effort in Brockville, the art store, the amazing art store in Brockville. And I told them, I was from Tribe. I started Tribe in the 90s, that music magazine in Canada. And Kathleen said, we're starting an arts magazine. Do you want to write for it? And so I ended up writing for it. But I didn't think anyone would. Why would you even start a magazine? As soon as they told me this, I was like, you have no idea what you're in for. That's what I was thinking. I mean, there was a time when I was publishing Tribe in the 90s when people say, oh, I'm going to start a magazine. And maybe they'd put out a magazine for a couple of issues and then it would die off because you need sustained effort once you got it off the ground, right? That's the hard part nobody really considers. But starting it, printing the first issue is actually quite easy. Not easy, but it's you can do it. Anybody can do it. And I'll tell you how right now. So you have to decide what your magazine is about. Okay, I assume you've already done that, right? Say you want to start a magazine about the local music scene in your community. Now, you could get little photocopies done and create what's called a zine, which is not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about a magazine, like printed on a commercial press that you're going to have to get somebody to print for you on a commercial printing press, as opposed to a zine, which is something you cut and paste and photocopy and put together yourself. Both are publications of love, but today I'm only talking about commercially printed magazines, which is what you want to do, right? You've got your idea. Say it's a gardening. You want to do a local gardening magazine, right? You say you've got a lot of gardeners in your community. So here's what you do first. You get a piece of paper and you figure out what you're going to call your magazine. That's important. That's probably the most, you probably already know that. Oh, I want to call it this, right? Or I want to call it that. Okay. Then you have to decide what kind of look you want for it. But here's where the math comes into play. Now, years ago, you'd see these magazines like Vogue, which were 300 glossy pages filled with advertising and all that stuff. Really high-end photography on the inside and just like very slick. Now, this is probably what you want, right? But that's not going to happen. Let me tell you right now. So put that out of your mind. You're not going to be able to have Vogue, print Vogue. You're not going to do that with your first issue. But you can do a better magazine than Vogue. And I'll tell you how. You print it on newsprint. You print it on cheaper kinds of paper. Now you're saying, oh, that reduces the vibe of what I want to do. But it doesn't really. I mean, unless you get a newsprint, a color newsprint magazine side by side with Vogue, you're not going to even, that's not even going to come into your mind, right? Okay. You're at your local coffee shop. You're picking up a free magazine. It's printed on newsprint, color newsprint maybe, and you take it with you and you read it at the table while you're in the coffee shop or whatever. This is how you get exposed to these, and it doesn't really matter if it's a glossy, slick publication. It just has to have a vibe to it, and it has to be well put together. And you can do all this. Now, the first step, as I say, is get a piece of paper and sketch out some ideas. Okay, what you're going to call your magazine, what it's sort of going to look like. Okay, take your paper quality down from the beginning. Sketch out some basic ideas. How many copies? Let's start with 5,000 copies. Okay, you're going to print 5,000 copies of this magazine that is about gardening that you've decided to publish. Now, in the gardening magazine, what you're going to need photos. You're going to need content. By content, I mean text content, stories, articles, columns. Now, if it's a free magazine, you can likely get the content for free because people want people to see their content. They want people to read their columns. They want people to see their photography, and they will gladly give you this material for your magazine if you credit them for it. So by credit, I mean if you say, oh, photo by Alex D, or photo, or the column is by John Smith, about gardening, and this is John Smith's column. So John Smith is giving you the column for free, but he wants his name mentioned in the magazine as the author of the column. So you're getting that content. You don't have to fork out money for that just yet, right? We'll get to that probably in another episode, paying for content. But the initially you can probably get a magazine, a small magazine worth of content together for free. So you're not having to pay for that. What you're going to have to pay for is the printing of this magazine. Now, how do you learn about that? You have to call some printers up and ask them. That's all it is. Now, how are you going to find printers? Okay, a lot of times in your community, sometimes you get grocery flyers, right? Those newsprint flyers that show pictures of the veg and meat that are on sale at your local supermarket. Somebody is printing those. And the same press that is used for printing those may be able to print your magazine. And sometimes when you look closely at those grocery flyers that come in your mailbox or in your you usually get, it's junk mail. You get it in your mailbox and you're like, oh, fuck, another flyer for, grapes are on sale for, So you're already looking at the pictures and stuff. The pictures on these grocery flyers are good enough to sell you grapes and meat. So they're going to be good enough to whoever printed those are going to be good enough to do your magazine. So you normally, when you see these flyers, you look at the very bottom, right near the edge of the page where the page is cut off, and there might be some small print, which will tell you who printed that flyer. And if they're local in your area, you call them up and say, look, I want to print 5,000 copies of a magazine. What's it going to cost me, and what do I need to do? That's how you find the printer who printed the flyer, who will be able to print your magazine. You call them up. The first questions you ask them is, look, we're putting together a magazine, and what do I need to know from you in order to do that? They'll tell you. They'll tell you what kind of digital file you need to give them. They'll tell you even if you need to do that. They might be able to set it up for you even if you send them the content prepared in the way they like. So just ask them a bunch of questions and they'll tell you. They want your business, right? These printing presses are hugely expensive, and if they're sitting there in between jobs collecting dust, that's losing money for that company that does that printing. So they want your magazine on that press. They want to fill up that dead time on the press with your magazine. So they're going to be very interested in answering your questions about printing it and publishing it. So on your scrap of paper, you've written down the name of your publication. Just say 5,000 copies, because that's normally the least you can get. So let's start there. 5,000. 10,000 copies. So ask for a quote for 5,000 and 10,000. And then the number of pages. Okay, this is another thing you have to know about magazines on a press. Pages come in 4s. You can't add 1 extra page to a magazine. You have to add 4 extra pages. So on a newsprint press, or like the flyer press that you're getting your flyers, or whoever's printing your flyers that you get in your mailbox, on the newsprint, color newsprint flyers, not photocopied flyers here. Whoever's printing those flyers, if you call them up and you say, hey, I want to produce a 10-page magazine or whatever, they'll say, no, you can't do that, because it's in groups of 4s. The pages fit on a plate, which is 4 pages. So you can print a 4-page magazine, an 8-page magazine, 16. So let's start at 16 pages. We're doing 16 pages. and ask them for a quote for 5,000 copies, 16 pages, and then the flyer you got in your mailbox, measure that. Measure that with a ruler. Say, it's going to be this big. Quote me. Can you quote me on that? Then ask them also what kind of files they need, or what they need to do their printing, and they'll tell you exactly. And then once you have that information, you'll have the price, what it will cost to print your magazine, and what you're going to need technically to give the printer in order for them to do it, and what kind of money you're going to need to raise to get the first issue on the street. Now, that amount of money you're going to have to raise, I mean, that's just for the first issue, okay? And that will cover the printing of it. You also must think about distributing it. You'll probably do it yourself. You'll probably go to shops and coffee shops and drop them off yourself. I mean, if you're starting from scratch, right? Which is what this is about, the show's about. So you'll be distributing it at first, but eventually you'll end up having to pay somebody, or paying somebody to do it, or working at some kind of exchange or something in order to get that happening. But for now, let's just worry about getting the first issue printed, or getting the costs together and what that's going to cost. So on your slip of paper in front of you now, you got the name of your magazine, you got 5,000 copies, you got the size of it, you got color, what it's going to cost to do in black and white, what it's going to cost to do in color. Because this is the other thing, color doesn't come for free. You have to pay for that. The black and white printing is the basic stuff, right? You can publish a whole black and white magazine. My first issue of Tribe in 1993 was entirely, there was no color in it. It was just black and white on newsprint, because that's all I could afford. So you can, if you can't afford color because it costs, you can, for the first issue, you can start in black and white and grow from there. I mean, whatever. If your publication idea is so good that people will buy ads in it, a lot of advertising, you'll be able to upgrade your publication as you go. I mean, but generally speaking, these things that start off have to develop followings in order to continue. So start small, keep the budget tight, and grow from there. That's how publishing works. So already you don't have overheads, you don't have huge staffs of journalists, you don't have any of that. You don't have, big studios to deal with, or you don't have the printing press because you don't own that. The printer owns that. You're just leasing space on it for your publication. You can be a publisher the moment you contact a printer and get them to print a publication that you've designed and put together. You instantly become a publisher. Now, how hard is all this to do? That's what you want to know, really, I guess. And why would anyone start a magazine now? As I said at the beginning, people are growing unhappy with the online world. I know businesses are. I mean, as the big tech platforms suck all the wealth out of it and heap costs onto all of us for being online. I mean, people are looking at other ways to communicate culturally, or communicate for advertising purposes, to publish a magazine to allow advertisers to reach new markets that they can't get through online advertising. So there may be some hope, I guess, for the medium. But anyway, somebody who's going to publish a magazine is going to do it, whether it's a good idea or not. I think they're going to do it because it's a It's something that they want to do, and they're going to go for it, and they're going to do it. Like the local fish wrapper here in Brockville in southeastern Ontario. Like Tribe, my magazine in the early 90s, and like many alternative weeklies around North America that have closed now, that are out of business, that doesn't mean the idea of magazines is finished, right? I think there's hope for magazines, and you can publish your own. It's not that difficult, but it demands some careful thinking. So contact a printer, see what you have to deal with cost-wise to print a 16-page black and white magazine, a 16-page magazine. Get a bunch of quotes. Here, I'll give you some ideas. Ask the printer what to ask the printer. Say, okay, I want to publish a 16-page magazine that looks like the flyer I got in the mail that you printed, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Or even if they didn't print it, go visit them and bring the flyer to them and say, okay, this is what I want. I want 16 pages. I want color on the outside, one color plate. So that's 4 pages of color in the whole publication. And get a quote for that. So you'll have 4 pages of color to work with, and out of your 16 pages. Now, one of those pages can be for the cover, the front cover and the back cover. And then the other pages you can sell advertising on. Ooh, you can give free color to somebody to get them to buy a bigger ad or whatever. You can be creative with this stuff. You'll learn how to do it. But anyway, we're just getting to the basics now of launching the thing. So you've got on your page, you got your costs. You've got your cost to produce a 16-page black and white magazine, a 16-page color magazine at 5,000 copies. Okay, now you know what you're in for. And you're going to distribute it yourself, so you're not going to have to pay for that. Now's the decision time. Do you want to do it? Because not only do you have to do this now for this first issue, but a magazine is something that comes out every so often. So if you're going to run a monthly, you're going to have to do this every month, right? Think about that. Or if you're going to do a quarterly, it comes out every 3 months or every 2 months. Whatever you decide. There's no model for this. You decide based on looking at those numbers on your sheet of paper. How often do you think you can do this a year? Do you think you can raise however much money is on that sheet of paper in front of you every month for a year to do this? Okay, this is the consideration here. This is don't do this unless you have the stamina to do it, at least for a year, all right? Then reevaluate. Then you can say, okay, I tried for a year and it sucked, so I give up. But give yourself a year and then do it. Now, printers are all over. And they're where you start with this process of publishing a magazine for your community or for your interest, whether it's gardening or muscle cars or what. Muscle Car Magazine, it's a local magazine in this part of the province that you can pick any concept or any idea or hobby and build a kind of a community magazine around it. I'm quite confident. I didn't think it was possible until I saw this local one start up here. But now that I've seen it, I know that it's possible to do. So people around North America, I'm sure we're going to start seeing a resurgence of magazines, of small magazines and community-oriented magazines, as a response to the lack of in online media. So anyway, it's not hard to do, but once you look at those numbers on your page, you can decide whether you want to do it or not. Now, the next step is to sell advertising to pay for the cost of the publication. And I'm going to tell you next week, I'm going to tell you how to sell advertising in the magazine. I'll give you some tips on how to do that. And that way, you can pay for the cost of printing it. So, this is Magazine Publishing 101. Publish your own magazine. Make it pay for itself at least. And you can be a publisher too. They're coming back. Magazines are coming back, and I am frickin' glad they are too. It's like, it's nice to see something curated, that somebody's put some love into it, that people from the community get together and put input into, and it gets printed, and bam, it's out there. The other thing about magazines, it's important to remember, is that they are snapshots in time. A lot of the reason we all feel so unsettled these days is there's no benchmarks or posts. The internet's just flowing. It's like a fire hose of data just flowing past us. And there's nothing there's no way to ground yourself and to see it all, or to because it's like you're bobbing around on the surface of this huge ocean of stuff. And what a magazine does is it's a snapshot in time. So you can take a magazine like, say, Tribe magazine, one of my magazines from 1993, and you'll get a snapshot of what the scene was like back then, or what the culture was like back then, or it'll be a snapshot. Sure, it'll be a curated snapshot, and it'll be from the publisher's point of view, or what the publisher had to do to get the magazine on the street, or whatever. It'll be his or her viewpoint of what was going on, but at least it'll be a record and a benchmark and an historical document of what actually happened, because we're not getting any of that these days. It's all just flowing past us. I think that's a lot of reason why people don't feel grounded in life, because the media is just like Hollywood, I said, is gone. The media is just like a fire hose of data. And so I think that's another reason why magazines are coming back, because it's like the slower cooking of there's more taste, right? Like the slow cooked cultural news kind of thing. Anyway, so now you have your homework for this week. You have to, if you're going to want to start a magazine, find a printer, call them up. Ask them questions about what you need to do in order to make that happen. They'll tell you. They will. And if they don't, they need to get a better salesperson at the printing house, because they want the business, let me tell you. And they'll do anything to help you. They will, but you still have to pay for the printing. But call them up, find them first, and keep your eyes peeled for grocery store flyers, because whoever prints those, like I say, if they can display a photo of a bunch of grapes on that food grocery store flyer, and it looks like grapes, then they'll be able to print your magazine. So that's it. Starting your own magazine. You can be a magazine publisher, and this is Magazine Publishing 101. I'm Alex D., the Cannabis Goldsmith, a jeweler, a former magazine publisher, a photographer, just an all-around ordinary guy who loves the media and can make it like you can. So anyway, that's it for me this week. See you next week. I'll talk a little bit next week about selling advertising in order to make your art, and which is another way to get funding in order to produce your art. See you next week. The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications, Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. You can see what we do at tribe.ca. Send us an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith.